Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The impossible breakthrough that shocked the galaxy, humanity's revenge. The sky cracked open with a silent, unnatural shimmer. One moment, the world was bathed in the familiar hum of city life, car horns blaring, people chattering, the distant echo of machinery churning. The next, there was silence. Not just any silence, but an eerie, oppressive vacuum, as if the universe itself had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Above Earth, the arrival had begun. Massive obsidian black structures descended from the heavens, blotting out the sun. They didn't roar, they didn't shimmer with light or pulse with energy, they simply arrived, defying gravity, drifting down like leaves on an invisible wind. The largest hovered ominously over Washington, D.C., casting a shadow so vast it turned midday into twilight. Others positioned themselves over major cities, Moscow, Beijing, London, Tokyo, Johannesburg. And still, there was no sound. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Hayes stood at the edge of the Pentagon's war room, staring at the live satellite feed. It made no sense. Alien ships had arrived, but there were no broadcasts, no threats, no demands, no electromagnetic signals of any kind. Even radio waves seemed to vanish into the void around them. Any response? General Peterson's voice was gruff, clipped, but laced with tension. "Nothing, sir," came the reply from a communications officer. "No signals, no movement. They're just there." That was the terrifying part. They weren't attacking, weren't speaking, weren't acknowledging anything. The ships had simply appeared, massive and indifferent. It was as if humanity had been put under a microscope, a specimen being observed. Then, as if to confirm that chilling thought, people started falling. It began subtly, passers-by in Times Square simply dropping mid-stride, a mother pushing a stroller crumpling like a puppet with severed strings, a businessman adjusting his tie and then face-planting onto the pavement. Across the world, it spread like a ripple, like a silent, unseen wave sweeping through the most populated areas. No screams, no struggle, just collapse. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered in the war room. Hayes felt his pulse hammering as he watched the numbers climb on the live death counter. Thousands. Hundreds of thousands. Millions. Are they targeting specific people? Peterson barked. "No pattern, sir," an analyst said, voice shaking. "It's random. Old, young, rich, poor. Anyone. Except us," Hayes muttered. The war room fell into a heavy silence as the realization settled in. The Pentagon, along with every military base, was unaffected. Remote locations, underground bunkers, ships at sea, everyone still stood, breathing, heartbeat steady. It wasn't just an attack. It was selection. And for the first time in human history, the enemy hadn't come with weapons. They had come with silence. But humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. Panic spread like wildfire, but there was no enemy to fight, no voice to plead with. The streets of major cities were littered with bodies, unmoving, untouched. The world had fallen into a quiet, suffocating horror. At the Pentagon, the silence in the war room was broken only by the frantic keystrokes of intelligence officers and the occasional hushed curse. No one could process what was happening. It wasn't a virus, it wasn't radiation, it wasn't a weapon they could see. "We have to retaliate," General Peterson said, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched. "If they're selecting who lives and who dies, we need to show them we won't just stand by." "Retaliate with what?" Hayes asked, shaking his head. "We can't even detect them. We can't communicate with them. We don't know how they're doing this." "I don't care," Peterson snapped. "We have nukes. We have orbital weapons. We hit them with everything we've got." Hayes hesitated. Something felt wrong. This wasn't a standard invasion. There were no explosions, no battleships opening fire. The aliens weren't even engaging with their weapons. They had come in silence, killed in silence, and now they were waiting. What were they waiting for? "Sir," a trembling voice called from the intelligence station. "We've got something on the satellites." The screen shifted to a high-altitude feed. One of the alien ships hovered over New York City, unmoving. But now, something was happening to the ground beneath it. The air rippled, a strange distortion bending the light. Then, in a slow, surreal motion, the bodies began to rise. Not all of them, just some. Some of the fallen lifted into the air like weightless puppets, their limbs hanging limp, their heads lolling to the side. They weren't conscious, they weren't struggling. They simply ascended. "Where the hell are they taking them?" someone murmured. Hayes's gut twisted. It wasn't random. The people who remained on the ground, the ones who weren't taken, were young children, a handful of elderly, a few middle-aged civilians. But most of the ones being lifted into the air were between 20 and 50, the prime years of adulthood. "They're taking the strongest," Hayes whispered, the realization dawning like a slow, creeping nightmare. "For what?" The silence deepened. Then the radios crackled, the first sound since the arrival. A single voice, cold, indifferent, "You are unworthy." The words echoed across every frequency, every channel, every device that could transmit sound. It was everywhere at once, a voice from nowhere and everywhere. The world held its breath. Hayes clenched his fists. "The hell we are," he muttered. And at that moment, he swore humanity would prove them wrong. The silence that followed that message was worse than the message itself. "You are unworthy." The words lingered in the air like an aftershock, digging into the minds of every surviving human. The war room at the Pentagon was frozen. The screen still showed bodies rising into the sky, disappearing into the dark, monolithic alien ships. The rest of the world could only watch in helpless horror. "We need to move now," General Peterson barked, snapping everyone out of their trance. "If they think we're unworthy, we show them otherwise. Mobilize every fighter jet, every drone, every missile we have. I want a full assault on those ships before they finish whatever the hell they're doing." "But what if attacking makes it worse?" someone asked. "Worse?" Peterson spat. "Look at the damn screen. We don't even know if those people are alive." Hayes felt cold. He knew Peterson was right, but something about this still didn't make sense. If the aliens wanted them dead, they could have wiped the planet clean in seconds. But they hadn't. They had chosen. And that terrified him more than a full-scale invasion ever could. "Sir," a comms officer said, voice tight. "We're detecting activity from the International Space Station." Hayes frowned. The ISS. A new screen blinked to life. The station was still in orbit, but its cameras had caught something horrifying. A second wave of ships, smaller, needle-like, were descending from the mother ships. Not attacking, not bombing. Harvesting. The smaller ships extended thin, whip-like tendrils, dragging entire buildings upward. Skyscrapers, vehicles, infrastructure, anything and everything deemed useful was being taken. "They aren't just taking people," Hayes gritted his teeth. "This isn't extermination. It's acquisition," another analyst whispered. "We're not fighting an army. We're being processed." The room went deathly still. Then the first missile was launched from an undisclosed military base. An intercontinental ballistic missile streaked toward the ship over Washington, D.C. It hit its target dead center, detonating with enough force to level the city. The shock wave shattered windows, rocked buildings, and sent a fireball stretching into the sky. For a moment, there was hope. And then the fire dissipated. The ship remained untouched, unbothered, unmoved. "Oh God," someone muttered. Before anyone could process what had happened, the ship responded. It was instant. It was merciless. From the ship's surface, a pulse of light rippled outward, sweeping across the entire city like a wave of laser. Wherever it touched, people simply vanished. No scream, no resistance. One moment they existed, and the next they were gone. The Pentagon's feed cut out. Washington, D.C. had been silenced. The war room erupted into chaos, people shouting commands, overlapping, soldiers gripping their weapons as if that would make a difference. But Hayes barely heard any of it. His mind was racing. This wasn't war. This wasn't conquest. This was judgment. And humanity was failing. But if the aliens thought they were unworthy, then humanity had no choice but to prove them wrong. The world fell into chaos, but it wasn't the chaos of war. It was something worse, helplessness. For the first time in human history, the enemy wasn't something they could bomb, shoot, or negotiate with. The ships loomed overhead, their presence as indifferent as gods watching from the heavens. Washington, D.C. was gone, wiped from existence in the blink of an eye. The other ships hadn't moved, hadn't retaliated further. They simply continued their quiet harvest, selecting their chosen ones while stripping the planet of its resources. At the Pentagon, the war room was in freefall. "DC is gone," a technician screamed, voice raw with disbelief. "Not destroyed, gone. There's nothing left. No debris, no radiation, no bodies. Nothing." Hayes gritted his teeth, his mind working faster than it ever had before. The aliens didn't just erase the people in Washington. They erased the city, as if it had never existed. No wreckage, no ruins. Just empty earth where the Capitol once stood. General Peterson slammed his fist against the table. "I want every military branch ready to fire. We hit them with everything we've got. Orbital strikes, cyber warfare, biochemical." "That won't work," Hayes interrupted, his voice sharper than he intended. The war room went silent. "You saw what happened. They didn't just survive the missile. They ignored it. And when we attacked, they reacted like we were insects in their way. We're not at war. We're being discarded." Peterson's nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. The evidence was on every screen in the room. The aliens weren't attacking cities. They were culling populations with surgical precision. And now they had erased Washington as if it were nothing more than an afterthought. "We need to change tactics," Hayes continued. "They don't see us as a threat. That's our only advantage. We need to figure out why they're doing this and how they're choosing who lives and who dies." Peterson exhaled through his nose, hands balled into fists. "And how the hell do we do that? Walk up and ask them?" "No," Hayes said. "We observe them the same way they're observing us." A tense silence followed. Then someone spoke up. "Sir," one of the intelligence officers said, his face pale. We might have a way." All eyes turned to him. He gulped but continued. "NORAD picked up a small anomaly about an hour before the arrival. It wasn't one of the ships. It was something else. A signal, a single frequency buried beneath normal radiation levels. We thought it was just background noise at first, but it's identical to the energy signature coming from the ships." "Where was the signal coming from?" Hayes asked. The analyst hesitated. "Antarctica." The room went silent again. Antarctica. One of the last untouched frontiers of Earth. No major cities, no significant military presence. Just ice, isolation, and whatever secrets had been buried there for millennia. Hayes and Peterson locked eyes. It was their only lead. Peterson exhaled sharply and turned to his officers. "Get me a task force. Black ops only. No comms, no electronic signals. If we're going in, we're going in cold." Hayes nodded. He was already running through the possibilities in his head. If the signal was tied to the ships, it could be their first real chance to understand the enemy. Maybe even their only chance. Because if humanity didn't figure out what was happening soon, there wouldn't be anyone left to fight back. The flight to Antarctica was as quiet as the skies themselves. Hayes sat in the cargo hold of the stealth transport, surrounded by a team of 12 elite operatives. No insignia, no names, just trained ghosts moving without a trace. Outside, the world had gone deathly still. Major cities were abandoned, their streets filled with the fallen. The alien ships hung over them, unmoving, silent. The selection process continued, and no one knew how long it would last. The pilot's voice crackled in his earpiece. 2 minutes out. Hayes glanced at the team. Weapons check. Remember, if these things can erase cities, our firepower is worthless. We're here to gather intel, not pick a fight. The soldiers nodded. They all knew what was at stake. As they broke through the Antarctic storm, the landscape came into view. A barren wasteland of ice and snow. But in the middle of the frozen nothingness, something stood out. A structure. It wasn't alien. It wasn't human either. It was old. Massive dark stone jutted from the ice, arranged in unnatural formations. Some of the slabs had collapsed, others remained standing. It looked like ruins. But ruins of what? Then the scanner pinged. The same energy signature as the alien ships. Hayes felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Hayes tightened his grip on his rifle. They had come looking for answers, but some answers were better left undiscovered. The transport touched down on the ice with a muffled thud, the landing as smooth and silent as the world around them. Even the storm seemed hesitant to make noise, the wind howling just faintly enough to remind them that they weren't alone. Hayes unstrapped his harness and stood. The rest of the team was already moving, their training evident in the seamless efficiency of their actions. No wasted movements, no hesitation. They knew the stakes. The moment the ramp lowered, the cold slammed into them like a physical force. The temperature was lethal, -60 degrees at least, but their thermal suits kept them functional. They moved in a tight formation, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the ruins ahead. Up close, the structures were even more unsettling. The dark stone formations weren't natural. They were placed, designed. Massive slabs jutted out of the ice at odd angles, some still half buried, others towering overhead like the rib cage of some long-dead beast. Strange, intricate carvings ran along the surfaces, worn down by time but still distinct. Picking up a strong frequency, one of the team members muttered, checking his scanner. Same as the ships. It's coming from below us. Hayes nodded. He had expected that. There's got to be an entrance somewhere. Spread out, look for anything that resembles a passage. The team fanned out, their boots crunching softly against the ice. The ruins weren't just old. They were ancient. Hayes could feel it in his bones. This place had been buried for eons, hidden beneath Antarctica's frozen grip. But the question was, who built it? And why was it emitting the same energy signature as the alien ships? Over here, one of the soldiers, Calloway, waved them over to a massive, partially collapsed archway. The ice had cracked around it, revealing a dark tunnel leading deep underground. A cold draft whispered out, sending a chill through Hayes's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. This is it, Calloway said. Looks man-made. Not man-made, another soldier corrected. Something made. Hayes took point, leading them inside. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, like they had been carved with precision far beyond human capability. The deeper they went, the more intricate the carvings became. Strange symbols, patterns that didn't belong to any known language. They weren't random. They had meaning. Then the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The moment Hayes stepped inside, his breath caught in his throat. The room was massive, the ceiling vanishing into darkness above them. Strange, obelisk-like structures dotted the space, some intact, others shattered into pieces. But at the center of it all was the source of the signal. A machine. It was massive, embedded into the very rock itself, pulsating with a faint, eerie glow. And it was alive. The team froze. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Hayes stepped forward cautiously. The machine wasn't just running. It was broadcasting. "Sir," Calloway whispered. "This thing's doing something." Hayes pulled out a small scanner and pointed it at the machine. The readings were off the charts.